Welcome, everybody, again to Comedians on Technology, People and Drugs. I am one of your co-hosts, Sam Joseph, ably joined by super co-host Joe Vaughan, and today we're very lucky to have Craig Craw, up-and-coming comedian, joining us. Craig, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Great stuff. And I mean, just for people, these poor people who don't necessarily yet know you, obviously many of our listeners will, but do you want to give us a little intro about yourself as a comedian, the direction you're heading in, your background?
Yeah, I mean, I had my first ever stand-up gig about 9 years ago in front of 250 people at the Stand Comedy Club in Edinburgh in February of 2013. I was 18 years old, and I didn't know that other venues were available to do a first ever comedy gig. I thought like a full-time comedy club was your only chance at doing stand-up comedy. So
how did you get on the list then? Did you just go walk in and say hello?
It was I applied. So I was listening to Kevin Bridges talk about his beginnings in stand-up, and he messaged the Stand Comedy Club in Edinburgh and said, "Hey, I'd like to do 5 minutes. I'm only 17. Would that be a problem?" And they got back to him and they gave him a gig. And in June of 2012, I messaged the Stand Comedy Club and said, "I'd like to do 5 minutes. I'm only 17. Would that be a problem?" Expected them to get straight back to me and be like, "Yeah, come on in." But they actually didn't get round to replying to me until September when I had turned 18, and told me that they've got a 5-minute spot available for me in February of next year. So I had 6 months to prepare, and
Fantastic. How did that first gig go?
It went well enough so that they would invite me back. I know. But again, I really wish I had gotten the chance to do some smaller, less intense places, because obviously it was like the Red Raw at the Stand has always been known as being like a very, very great night where you could go see 10, 12 new acts for like £2, and it was just a really, really good fun time. The place was always packed, but at the same time, if you've never done stand-up comedy before and you're getting brought on to a proper full-time comedy club and you're being, pushed onto a real stage in front of 250 people with like proper comedy club lighting equipment and everything, and it was intense. Wow. But yeah,
but you did all right.
I did all right.
Oh, it's fantastic.
But there were also other times where I did some sets at the Stand where I did absolutely abysmally bad. So that cancels it out.
But they were an amazing start. But see, that was 9 years ago.
And
had an interesting comedy journey since then. Do you want to fill us in?
Yes. So I did comedy. I would say semi-regularly, because if you're only doing comedy 4 or 5 times a month, you're not really doing it regularly. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I did it semi-regularly for probably about 2.5, 3 years, from the start of 2013 until like the end of 2015, start of 2016. And I did maybe 70 or 80 gigs in that sort of 2.5 year period. So but then I just kind of gave it up to focus on playing online poker, which has basically been my full-time job for a while. And then I really started to do stand-up comedy again once I moved to Asia at the end of 2018. So,
where did you move to in Asia?
Originally, a place called Chiang Mai, Thailand, and then seeing as the comedy scene in Chiang Mai, Thailand was very small, because it's a Thai city of only like 400,000 people. It's very, very niche market for English comedy. However, I then moved down to Bangkok, which is a much bigger English comedy scene, and I was at a point where I was doing stand-up comedy literally every single night when I was in Bangkok for 6 to 10 months kind of period.
That's a wild story. So you start at the kind of at the kind of pinnacle, because Edinburgh is like the kind of mecca, right? I'm from Edinburgh, so
I would say New York City is very much the mecca for stand-up comedy.
Is it all right? I'm going on the festival stuff, and the UK comedians that I hear about, you know, getting a show at Edinburgh and doing well at Edinburgh is a thing, right? In the UK scene, maybe Mecca was the wrong sort of comparison, but as a sort of local in Edinburgh, that's the sort of festival and that sort of stuff kind of passes you by a little bit, and those kind of the cultural sort of places like that. I've never even heard of it. I don't even know where it is. It's like, where is it? And then the
Stand Comedy Club, I believe it's York Hill. Does that ring a bell?
I know where that is.
That road, like that's just going off memory. I'm pretty sure it's on a road called York Hill, and it's maybe from memory like a 10-minute walk from, I want to say Waverley, but it could be.
Yeah, I know exactly where you are. Yeah, it's just one of these places. I've probably walked past it thousands of times and just never noticed it was there. So stand up in Bangkok, I mean, that's you don't hear that every day. So like, how does that scene work?
It was fucking mental. How long have you got? Basically,
I've been to Bangkok. I know what Bangkok's like, right?
So
we've both been to Thailand, but yeah, tell us. We're really interested.
You must know, if you've been to Bangkok, you must know of the road, Khao San Road.
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay, so basically, there was a guy, pretty much a C-list Thai celebrity, because he'd been in like Thai movies and he spoke perfect Thai, and a genuine C-list celebrity called John Sampson. He's from Boston originally, but he'd be living in Thailand for 14 years, and basically this was all before COVID. This is like end of 2018, 2019 time. He invested in all of his money into opening up the Khao San Road Comedy Club. And basically, the business model for that venture was to basically just do all the marketing on the night by handing out flyers to people that were walking up and down the Khao San Road, and basically just invite them to buy tickets for the show, and then we would put on a show for them, and then John would keep all of the money. That's how that would work. So, and it was really great because basically, because there's always this constant influx of tourism, or there was before COVID, into that tiny little region of Bangkok specifically, that big backpacker road. We would always get like new customers every single night that would come in and watch us perform. So it didn't really matter that we were doing 10 minutes and 9.5 minutes was like the same shit basically, and then you just try and tweak it a little bit, because that was like, it was a really great opportunity for us to polish up all of our sets. But it was really annoying that we basically had to hand out flyers for 2 hours on the most exhausting hellhole of a road known to man.
I've stayed on it, mate. It was like I was 18 and I was on the Khao San Road, and I was like, really, fuck this. I was like,
and that must have been, you must have been 18, a few decades ago. I'm sure.
Yeah. You're not wrong, but yeah, I remember I'd been in Australia and I was coming back through, and someone said, "Oh, you might as well stop off in Thailand." I hadn't planned it, and I was like, "Yeah, all right, might as well," and just ended up there like just totally bewildered, overwhelmed, like with what is this? I mean, I got out. I mean, I had a great time, but just
it's a fun place to be for like a night or two. But
yeah, I was
to hand out flyers on that road every night for 6 to 10 months of your life. It's absolutely.
Yeah, I was there when it was Songkran.
And
it was a wild night in Bangkok. I mean, it was wild, and I was with these Australian guys. Small anecdote, and we were kind of hammered on the Mekong and driving around and on the water trucks and chucking things around, and then end up in bars and dancing on poles and getting chucked out. But then I actually saw the first and only time I've ever seen this was like these two brothers. One of them availed himself of kind of local kind of whatever opportunity, shall we say. But he was with his brother, and they both did it, but they only had one condom between them. So I swear to God, I've never seen this before. and never since someone actually get a condom, wash it out, and wear it. wear the washed out condom.
Times were tight, as they say. Yeah.
I mean, they were brothers and they were very close, and it was. I was like, I could not believe what I was saying. But anyway, 18. But that's one of the stories you can tell of Songkran and Bangkok.
I think you should explain what Songkran is to the listeners.
As I understand, I might get it wrong. It's Thai New Year, which basically turns the whole of the city into an enormous.
The whole of the country turns into a massive water gun fight for 3 days.
Yeah,
just everyone's got these massive super soaker, like these guns that you give to children, these water guns, these massive water guns, and everyone just goes around shooting each other. Oh, it was great fun.
Oh, it's wild. Yeah, I've actually done it in Samui as well, I think, but it was much more low key. I was with my fiance.
Yeah.
But the Songkran in Bangkok, it was literally it's a wild. And there's what's that stuff the white paste stuff that you like?
Oh, it's just I don't know exactly what you would call it, but just I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, it's one of the best nights of my life. I think it might even have been around the time when Tyson got beat by Buster Douglas. That was how heavy a weekend. It was wild.
What was that, like 1991 or something?
Yeah. Mike Tyson had got beat by Douglas. It was in Tokyo. We were in Bangkok. Unbelievable night. It was like I might have mixed it up in the annals of time, but yeah, amazing. That's a wild story. I love that story. Falkirk, as we were chatting before, because I'm from Leith. I know Falkirk. I used to go out with the girl from Falkirk. I know that route brilliantly well. But Falkirk to Chiang Mai to the Khao San Road comedy is a wild. And
then I basically I was doing a lot of visa runs to Vietnam because I didn't have any proper visa for Thailand. I was just on the tourist visas. So what you need to do is you need to leave the country every 3 months for a few weeks or a month or whatever, and just have a vacation somewhere else, and then you can come back in. And so basically I was doing that, and I did that, 4 or 5 times. And then in February of 2020, I left Bangkok once again to go to Hanoi, and my plan was to stay there for 2 or 3 months and really explore the north of Vietnam. But then COVID happened, and I ended up staying in Vietnam for nearly 2 years.
So it's like you're stuck in Vietnam. What was it like internally? Because you move around, where you kind of? Oh,
it was fine. Initially, in the 2020 COVID era, Vietnam did better than just about any other country on earth because they closed their borders so quickly. And so, they had from April 2020 until May in 2021, they had no COVID. And so everything was wide open. And that's how I managed to record my stand-up comedy special in April of 2021, in front of 40 people in this packed tiny room, and obviously nobody gave a fuck because there was no COVID there. But then the month after that, COVID did leak into the country, and then it just got completely out of hand, and it was not fun.
So you did a special in Hanoi, like a comedy,
and I was in Saigon at that point.
This is like,
well, I moved in September of 2020. I moved down to Saigon from Hanoi, and it was a tough decision to make, but I just felt it was the right thing for me because I'd spent some time in Saigon anyway, and in the 2019, and my feeling was that the comedy scene in Saigon were a little bit, what's the word? They took it a little bit more seriously than some of the people in Hanoi were taking it, and I wanted to be in a more professional scene, and so that's why I moved down there. And it was a shame because I had a lot of really close friends in Hanoi outside of the comedy circle, whereas when I moved to Saigon, I really only knew people in the comedy circle, which was fine because I would do comedy, 5 nights a week, and I would hang out with them. But it was unfortunate that I didn't have any coffee drinking buddies that didn't know anything about stand-up kind of thing. Because the thing is that when you're with comedians, a lot of the time you really only chat shit about stand-up, and it was good to have friends that really weren't into that. And
so what were the crowds? Was it a kind of a mixed kind of expat crowd? Was it?
Yeah, it was. I'm not gonna lie, it was a lot of expats with their Vietnamese girlfriends who didn't really understand a fucking word we were saying.
Right.
But it's all good. It's all good. That's just what happens.
But you were, despite COVID, you were able to carry on gigging pretty much the whole way through.
In 2000, I am 100% sure I must have the world record for most amount of live stand-up comedy gigs done in 2020. In 2020, I did, I want to say, about 200 live comedy shows in 2020 in front of live audiences. There was even like a Hanoi. There was the Vietnam 2020 stand-up comedy competition that went on, and they had like 200 people coming to see the final that I was in, and yeah, I did. I think I want to say March of 2021, I did 150 people at the Hard Rock Cafe in Saigon. So it was all good.
Fantastic. And as you were telling me when we met, and you very, very kindly, were bringing for me at Lollipops. But you've moved back here, and you're like, right, really going to go for it to crack.
Yeah,
comedy,
because the thing is that like as fun as doing stand up is in Vietnam and in Thailand, unless you can speak Vietnamese and or Thai or whatever, you're not getting any TV work. The ceiling is extremely low. And there's really like no way you can properly monetize it, no matter how much you'd like to. Whereas like, obviously, if you're very good in London, you can definitely build a career from it. So I want to try and give it a shot.
And how's that going so far? What's been there's the material you were doing in Asia, has that changed? Are you doing the same material? Or is it...
Well, of course, I mean, the good thing about doing a lot of gigs in front of people like the expat communities is the expat communities are from Australia, Canada, the UK, Germany, Sweden. And so because of that, your comedy becomes very universal in a way, but also because you're doing stand-up comedy in Asia, you can't help but make regional jokes that you would only really get the reference to these jokes if you were living in Asia. You talk about the lifestyle changes between, the Western world and Asia as an expat. That's going to be funny to expats, but of course, if you've never been to Asia, you're probably not going to find it that funny. But you just drop all that material and you write new stuff about life in London and whatever.
So what's your kind of writing sort of process? Are you sort of sit down and write loads? Do you kind of, does it come quite easily? How's it work for you?
Oh, it can be, people say that they have like one way of writing, whereas like for me, it can either be, it stems from one idea that I've had, and that I just kind of, I've got this idea stuck in my head, and then I just can't help but write loads and loads and loads of stuff around that kind of seed of an idea that can, spread out into other things. Or it can just be, I've got nothing really to work on, so I'm just going to write as much as I can and just see what happens. And if it's like, yeah.
So you said you did a special. Is that can we find that anywhere? That
yes, you can. It's special.
Yeah.
But
yeah, but I think that's on YouTube, isn't it? So we'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah,
I'll have a watch.
It's like a 40-minute video of me doing stand-up comedy, and it has 2 camera angles, so that qualifies it as that qualifies as a special. But yeah.
And so yeah, and how are you now? Because I think when we first met, you'd almost just got and back to London. It's now been a couple of, how are the last? I mean, I've been seeing your face pop up with winning little awards and things and so on. I get the sense it's going reasonably well.
Oh, that little yes, absolutely. The Rising Star Comedy Club, absolutely. Yeah, I've got it right here, actually, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite rooms, actually, the Rising Star. Yeah,
no.
But yeah, how is it? I mean, are you getting the gigs that you want? Are you getting the momentum that you want this last couple of months?
Well, to be quite honest, I just thought that like my experience, like I've done stand-up comedy at this point probably about 700 times. Like
Right.
we're in that level of gigs, and I just thought like it would be like so easy for me to just kind of fast track myself up the queue, but that hasn't been the case. But it's fine. It's been good to grind all of these open mics where you need to bring someone and then you need to return that favor for the person that you bring and go to his gig, and it's a grind for sure. But you know, I'm enjoying it, and the thing about Vietnam was that you couldn't guarantee there would be more than like 6 people at a show.
Right.
Whereas like here, yeah, bringer shows are a bit annoying if you need to then repay the person that you bring. But say what you want about bringer shows, they do get an audience. There's no question about that.
I mean, it's a weird thing. I think everybody would just love to have a fantastic, you know, civilian audience each time. But the reality, with particularly in London, the number of venues, the number of people wanting to get up on stage, you know,
100%.
And I think, I mean, I've sort of resigned myself that, I mean, I was frustrating because I've got like limited number of nights of the week I can be out because as an older person, but I've resigned myself to say, well, I may gig less, but I'm going to meet fantastic comics like yourself and other people and just sort of, you know, connect with other people and do some bringer ones and see some other shows, you know, and roll with it, because I mean, we're just so fortunate to be, you know, on the doorstep of London. And there's just so much gig available, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. That's the great thing about London, is that you know, you might have to do some bringer shows or whatever, but at least you've got a variety of bringer shows to choose from. And if you don't like a promoter at one gig, you don't have to work with them, and you can go only do working at some other gig on the other side of town. So it's good for that.
So do you reckon you try and get back up to Edinburgh?
Not anytime soon. No, I want to really grind as much as I can here, because like I have been getting some paid spots because I have sent my special to some promoters in this town, and they I have gotten some paid work requests, and the paid work here for what little online presence I have and what little kind of exposure I've had to this scene, like the money that I have been offered is probably a lot better than what I would get in Edinburgh or Glasgow.
Right. It's interesting. I've heard people say, like, you know, on various like podcasts and stuff, that it's like it's harder than it used to be. Like
oh, 100%. Like I'm not like there's absolutely no doubt in my mind, because when I started, like basically when I this was like 9 years ago, bear in mind, but when I first applied for the stand, they were quite happy to take people who had never done comedy before. And now from what I hear, because I used to live in Glasgow for a couple of months at the end of last year, sort of October, November time, when I was getting vaccinated, and I did speak to some guys there, and like there's guys who have been gigging for 2 years in the Glasgow circuit, you know, doing Zoom. Obviously, the pandemic didn't help, but like even before COVID and since COVID happened, they were doing Zoom gigs, and now, you know, the gigs were getting back to being in front of live audiences. They were grinding hard, but they still were, you know, 6-7 months away on the waiting list just for get their first spot in the stand. Because
Is that just sheer numbers of people that are having a go?
100%, 100%, 100%. Oh, it's obviously, I'm sure there are other factors as well, but that's a huge factor.
Yeah. Well, so is it a bit like boxing, right? Because, you know, like boxing used to be one of these things that, you know, like very, very few people did, right? Because you went along, you punched in the face, you're like, fuck that, I'm not doing that. But nowadays it seems like there's so much like white collar boxing. There's like, you know, kind of semi-pro. There's like, I mean, obviously there's the sort of bare knuckle stuff as well, and there's the pro game. But it seems like there's just like tons more people that are kind of getting into boxing rings. Is it a similar thing? Is it just there's more people, therefore there's more people doing it, or is it just?
I think social media and influencer culture is making people have a serious think about like what they want to do with their life. And, you know, Especially I think the COVID thing had a big part in that as well. Like, I think after living through the pandemic and whatever, any kind of fear that you had about going on stage, if you really wanted to do it, is just gone. Like, everyone knows how fucking short life is now, and they've had a, like, and that's a part of it. But also, like, when people think about, you know, what they would do with their life, you know, and what their career would be, like, who the fuck wants to be a mortgage advisor or like whatever the fuck else? Like, why would you not want to at least like have a roll of the dice and see if you can become a comedian?
No, totally.
I think that's
yeah.
I think that's the thing for people as well.
That's a great insight, and I'm going to use that as a segue into one of our regular questions, which is one of my favorite ones, is about the technology. And you mentioned the social media there, and it does seem to me like, you know, back in the day, you had to phone up and put your name on the waiting line, and who knew what number. And like, as we're seeing at the moment, you know, for booking gigs, for being in contact with people, you know, you're Zoom, but like, it's just, you almost don't like. It's almost easier to run your own book, as it were, like reaching out to people, because you can just do it yourself and work out the dates and so on, what have you.
100%.
But I mean, the you know, do you feel that the technology is uniformly positive in terms of making things easier? I mean, lots of people doing stand-up, you know, it's very competitive. I mean, I guess even if that's harder for individual stand-ups, I mean, that competition is a good thing, that lots of people trying it and so on. But what do you know, we talked about this a little bit before, your feelings on technology. Are you a big fan of technology and all of its aspects?
Well, to answer your first question, I think that in some ways it's arguably made it easier, because you can really build the thing is like all promoters, when it comes down to it, all promoters give a fuck about is whether or not they can fill their seats.
Right.
And the thing now is that it's became like, because of social media and whatever else, it's now became a lot easier for anyone to get their face in front of people. And that's arguably made it easier to get, you know, famous, or someone that promoters would think, if I book this guy, people are going to come and buy tickets to this show to see this guy and other people. So it's easier in that sense, of course, but it's probably like, it's arguably, now that that's a big factor, it's now arguably not as important to be very good. Like, before social media, before, it was like, unless you were a complete asshole to the promoter or other comedians in the green room, like in the 90s, early 2000s, where you got booked was basically based upon how good you are and where you were willing to travel, basically. And now, like, you know, if you're the funniest guy in the city, but you have no social media, you don't promote the gigs that you're going to, right, all of this kind of stuff, if you don't want to do that, it's going to be much harder for you to make any money doing stand-up now than the guy who's maybe not even that funny, but has thousands of followers on Instagram and TikTok and is promoting it like crazy and is going to get people to come and buy tickets from the promoter. Well, and that's the reality.
Yeah. Well, that's like boxing. I mean, you've got that guy, the YouTuber,
Jake Paul. Yeah,
he's made 100%. Something like $24 million in a couple of fights. Hardly had a fight in his life. I mean, fair play, still does it. I mean, I'm not taking that away from him. But yeah, you've got someone like Jack Catterall at the last weekend, a couple of weekends ago, who fought for all the belts in front of everyone, got robbed, probably made very little money out of that once he's paid everybody and he's had to do his training camps and all the rest of it. So you've got this, like, it's crazy, like the way that social media has just changed the dynamic of it. It's like
100%.
So I would be good, yeah.
Yeah, so I would like, that would be my answer to your first question. It's like, but like, and my answer to your second question is whether I'm a fan of technology, is that, like, I mean, it's the cliche answer, but like, it's also a very good answer to add on to the first answer that I gave. But like, all of this technology is a gift and a curse. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's not humanity is imperfectible, and we're obviously not designed to have godlike technology.
Go on, Joe.
No, I mean, have you heard of the Canadian academic Marshall McLuhan?
Marshall McLuhan.
Marshall McLuhan.
I don't think so.
Underrated and definitely under read Canadian academic who wrote about media and about its impact on the societies that it operates in. And his famous line was, "The medium is the message." So it's like, and I think it's a slippery term to define, but it's like it basically says that the impact of a media is the changes that it makes in society, right? So the medium itself creates those changes. So what would you say? So like the internet and its proliferation of into kind of all areas of our life, and everyone then as a broadcaster creates this kind of like just this kind of maelstrom of information, and it overwhelms but things that were kind of tightly controlled before, like there's only kind of certain broadcast channels that you could watch. Now there's like literally millions, I guess, if you think every YouTube channel that there is, there's millions of these things. It's just kind of overwhelming. It's overwhelming to the population, and it's kind of and that's what we're really sort of struggling to adjust to now. So I mean, it's an interesting book, and it's worth reading. It's about the impact of different media and changes and developments on society generally. So yeah, it's.
Yeah, well, he's an interesting guy, McLuhan, and I think I always feel that that famous phrase of his is that the medium is the message is kind of weird, in as much as it seems to say that the medium by itself is sending a message. And I think, I don't know personally, when I've analysed it and broken it down, I think I would rephrase it as the medium is also a message. Like clearly the messages that you're sending over the medium are also messages.
Yeah, he's talking the difference between the content. That's why it's about slippery. He differentiates between the message, as we would think, the content of the medium.
Indeed, and that's the point that I'm making, though, is that if you say that the medium is the message, so then like that seems to imply that there's a message being sent like via the media, like by the choice of media, exclusive from the content. And so I mean, like I as a part of the PhD and masters, I've analysed this in some detail, and I agree you made this slippery, but I feel like it would be better phrased, the medium also includes a message. I mean, that's a separate line to go down. But I think it is like the fact that we are choosing to do this on Zoom as opposed to do it on Skype or whatever, that sends some message, but it doesn't preclude the fact that we might also send the same message via Skype or via Zoom. But to go back to what Craig was saying there, is I think what's particularly striking to me is, I mean, I kind of did like a social media detox for 3 years, not using Facebook or Twitter. I mean, I've also done similar things with like news things. And the thing is now, as a comedian, I've sort of like been drawn back onto it, and I'm addicted as hell. I'm for like every other, and this, we're talking to a young, even younger than you comic last week, and he was just there. And I guess I don't know how much whether you find this as well, Joe, but I just find myself in this state of like strange need. Like I have to kind of like engineer these times in my day, and it feels very unnatural. I mean, going to, like you say, it's a blessing and a curse. But I mean, both to Joe and to Greg, do you find yourself struggling to manage your social media time, or is it you're handling it better than me, because I'm a wreck?
I think. Well, no, you go first. Craig, you're the guest, so you go first.
Well, it's pretty easy for me because I've got so much shit to do that I don't really pay much attention to Instagram or whatever. And obviously I do fall into attention traps sometimes, but because I've got such a clear path on what I want to achieve in the next sort of 18 months or whatever, it's not as big a problem for me as it is for other people. But if I was to post more, and if I was trying to become an influencer or whatever, I could see it becoming a bit of a problem. But it's one of those things, if I was to become an influencer, then I would just have to accept the fact that, using social media would become a part-time job, and I need to treat it like that. So of course I'd spend a lot more time on it.
Well, that's what Jake Paul was saying. He's like, he posted a YouTube video every day for 2 years or 3 years, whatever it was. And he was like, while you guys were in the gym training, I was doing, raising my YouTube profile, which is what's got me the revenue that I've got today, as obviously a little bit of, physical capability and boxing skill. But yeah, I mean, it is an incredible grind. I mean, I some people that I've known and we'll come on to talk about it in a minute, but in the sort of plant medicines and psychedelic sort of scene, there are people who are massively active and like, you know, do it really brilliantly. It's only when you try and do it yourself do you realize just how fucking hard it is. You know what I mean? It's like, it's really not an easy thing, you know, like it's really, really brutal. So yeah, I mean, but you meant, you know, good segue into what I was going to ask you about, which is that kind of godlike technology, right? You know, humans, what did you say? Humans being imperfectible. Was that what you said? Humans are imperfectible, yeah? So the kind of technology that I'm sort of interested in at the minute is you know, around plant medicines and psychedelics, and they are also talked of in terms of being technologies. So you know, I'm a huge advocate for the you know kind of improved awareness and research into how these technologies can benefit our existence in you know, many different ways. So what have you had any kind of, you know, I'm asking for personal experiences, but I mean, share what you want to share, but I mean, have you got any insight into the new kind of technologies and things that are being discussed? Or not, they're not new technologies, obviously they've been around forever, but what's your kind of...
I like the, it's kind of, well, I am a huge fan of mushrooms, and you speak of it not being a new technology. I have seen some growing operations in Vietnam, and it looks like some pretty nifty and probably new technology. Like their sort of growing operations, it's pretty high tech stuff. So
wow, so there's kind of high tech psilocybin mushroom growing operations, and
it was mental to see. It was, and I couldn't believe I was just standing in some dude's crib, and this whole second bedroom was just this insane growing operation.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is that part of the kind of, you know, historical cultural tradition and that, because I mean, obviously you get mushrooms growing in that region, and I think Indonesia, as I understand it, like if you go Bali, there's this kind of like mushroom places you can go and stuff like that, as I understand it. Is that...
This is just a guy who wanted to make money. I don't know. Like,
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But I did sample some of his stuff, and it was really nice. So,
yeah.
But yeah. I still haven't tried like LSD or DMT, but it's certainly on the bucket list.
So
yeah. No, I just wanted to say that I am also a huge advocate. I think that every time I've had psychedelic experiences, they've all been extremely beneficial. I have, of course, had a few bad trips, as it were, but in their own way, I found those to be very beneficial on reflection. So absolutely, certainly for someone who has had some problems with anxiety and depression and things like this, it has been extremely beneficial to dip into that realm. So
yeah, well, I'll just lead in with my mention there that, of course, please be careful out there. We do strongly suggest seeking medical advice before using some of these substances. We want everybody to be careful.
Yeah.
I'm trying to work in the whole bad trip thing into, you know, I started my I did a course with you know, Sam and I, obviously nowhere near the same level of experience, and I'm falling way behind Sam now, because Sam's been a lot busier than I've been. But I started another course yesterday with Jeff Innocent, if you know who he is.
I've heard the name.
And I'm trying to work in the bad trip to my material, you know, like because that is obviously, people are frightened of the bad trip, and for good reason, because it can be a brutal and terrifying experience. But like you say, many people also report that it's so I'm just going to get bombed by my little girl. You're busy, darling. I'm busy. She's upstairs, darling. I was going to say, yeah. So a lot of people do report that after a kind of, you know, a challenging experience or a bad trip, whatever you want to call it, that there are you know, benefits on the other side of it.
Absolutely.
You know, I you know, particularly talking about things like, you know, kind of ayahuasca. I don't know if you heard much about ayahuasca.
I've heard so much about it, but from what I understand, if you want to do it, there's really only sort of one region of the world where you can do it properly.
Yeah, I mean, there's people who are traveling around a lot now, and there are sort of dispensations in places like Spain and Portugal where you can have legal ayahuasca experiences in Europe. And a lot of the healers from, say, Peru or Colombia are the kind of.
I would want it, like, if I was to do ayahuasca, which is on the bucket list as well, I think I'd want to go to the proper South American region.
Yeah, I mean, I have done that, and there's no doubt. I guess, like you're talking about comedy. You want to go to New York City. You want to if you're a boxer, you want to fight in Madison Square Garden, right? That's the thing. I get it for sure.
Well, and I wonder if, like, actually, but I think we're in a situation here where we know Joe from previous episodes is a strong advocate. I think, Craig, you are as well. I was sort of thinking about how, like, with comedy, like, for me, doing the comedy called Amused Mooses, Marcus Bourbon, and now getting out and gigging, it's been a revelation for me. I feel wonderful about it. I mean, I have, there are good gigs and bad gigs, and there's been the whole, roller coaster of emotion. And I'd certainly, like, say to people, oh, give it a try, do a course, or, this, that, and the other. Of course, not for everyone, but having gone through that experience, I don't think I'm necessarily an advocate for comedy. And I guess what I'm really interested, particularly for Joe, but also for Craig, I mean, having had some of those experiences, what is it that makes you want to advocate it more widely? I mean, more than, so I mean, Joe, obviously you've done the comedy course as well, but you're a stronger advocate for the psychedelics than you are for the comedy at this moment in time. What makes you want to advocate it, promote it?
Well, I think it's I think that the parts of the same response to a problem that I perceive, which is that as we kind of disappear more into a kind of materialistic and, dare I say, technological realm, and people are spending more time disconnected and away from each other and not interacting with a kind of organic environment and or other humans, I see that both psychedelics and comedy are part of a logical response to that, which is you can do that. You can stick your headset on and you can sit on your phone all day. And some people do spend hours and hours and hours in that perfectly happily. It's not something that I'm particularly happy about as a future, to be honest with you. I feel like there's a tremendous opportunity to have a kind of epic and magical existence over there, interacting with the organic realms and other humans. And comedy is a psychedelic experience, I think, because it's immediate, it cannot be faked. There's no, it is or it isn't. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like it happens at kind of quantum speed. So I think there's a massive overlap. It's part of as I say, to me, a perfectly logical response to a possibility of, like, fucking terrible life over there. So I mean, like, I think there's a fucking possibility of a very nice, challenging, and obviously viscerally difficult life over here, but it's worth pursuing that one.
That's a very poetic answer. It's fantastic. Craig, would you extend that? Or?
Well, I probably might shock you or whatever, but honestly, I wouldn't advocate mushrooms or any other psychedelic drug to anyone that isn't interested in it. I would only, if you're perfectly happy, if you've never done it and you're not really that interested in it, I'm not someone that would ever say, oh, you've got to try that, even though I've had such beneficial experiences on them. If you're not interested in having your consciousness altered and, exploring your subconsciousness, like, fine, don't, like, I would never ever say you should try it. If you're perfectly happy, don't do it. But if it's something that has interested you and you haven't done it, my advice would be definitely try it. But to touch on Joe's point, like, the first time I ever did mushrooms, I was in a northern town in Thailand called Pai. I don't know if you ever heard of it. And it's, it's a jungle town filled with like 2,000 Western hippies that just live there. And it was very, very fun to be around that community, because I spent so much time around people that, hadn't had a phone in years, that walked, on the ground with their bare feet, that didn't use technology at all, that basically just lived off the land pretty much, ate vegan, ate a very strict vegan diet, grew their own food, lived very, very much like human beings did 200 years ago.
Right.
Yeah. And it was they were extremely. I'm not saying that would be the life that I would want to live forever, but it was really nice to see human beings like that, because there's not a lot of human beings like that in London, that's for sure. And no, it was really great, and it was super interesting, and I like that people like that still exist. And I like Joe, I am a little bit terrified of, like, have you ever seen Ready Player One?
Yeah.
I'm a little bit terrified that we could be ending up like that. So
yeah, just to be clear, I'm not advocating that people do it. I'm advocating that the relationship legally changes.
100%. 100. Like I advocate that 100%.
Yeah, because at the minute what you've got is a situation where the way they're scheduled, so the scheduling of, for example, psilocybin, right? So I do a bit of work with a veterans charity, right? Veterans PTSD, also with like rugby players who've had like low concussive brain injuries. So traumatic brain injury and veterans PTSD is these are live issues that the medical establishment are trying to tackle. Psilocybin is a potential, showing some potential for treatments in both those areas. But because of the way it's Schedule 1, which is like, so you've got Class A, which is if you're carrying it, it's the worst thing, but it's also the scheduling of it from a research point of view. It's got the worst possible scheduling as well, i.e. no medical benefit. So the idea is what you do is you change the scheduling. It's not about the classification on the street level. You change the scheduling at the research level, so you can start to do more research, so you can start to get the data points, and you can start to do, more data equals more research, and we build from there. So that's the advocacy piece. Yeah, I mean, for sure, I'd never encourage anyone who was like, to do it. It has to be a personal calling.
It's also I made, like, it's so funny because like I had this mushroom experience, and basically I took mushrooms with this other person, and this other person was absolutely not prepared for the next 6 hours of their life to be just gone.
Yeah,
I don't know if they had like other plans or whatever, but they like in the middle of the trip, they like, when I told them this is going to be lasting 6, 7, maybe 8 hours, they were freaking out, and that put them in a bad spot. So it's certainly not something you should do if you've got work later in that evening as well.
This is where I hear that DMT is called the gentleman's trip, because it's 15 minutes.
Yes. Like, have you ever done DMT?
In and out. Through ayahuasca out in Peru. So like, that's been my kind of experience of these things. In an indigenous setting, and that's where the like you say, that's where the kind of you get a real sense of the kind of tradition and the history and the ancient wisdom that's kind of in the experience, so it's a category different thing from going down the park, and like having a bit of a trip. But no, that's cool. So I mean, so Sam, what you've got more questions?
Well, I have. Although I think we're mining a rich seed there. I just wanted to compliment. I want to say thanks to Joe for explaining the aspect of the advocacy, because the thing there, and just to sort of wrap that up, and I'll maybe might jump into our spirituality question, but we'll see. I hadn't. We've talked a lot about the potential benefits of psilocybin for brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder and so on. And like personally, I've always been really frustrated with the way in which drugs are categorized, and I think the criminalization of them creates a lot of the problems that we talked about in some previous pre-shows. And I think the fact that research is restricted through what are, like, it seems to me kind of like effectively a kind of a prudish approach to drugs, that is it's wrong. I think we're on the same page here, Joe, that they should be able to do research and things should change. And I guess it's the kind of thing that I feel like for me individually and in the past, right, I don't know if I can have any impact on that, but I guess you mentioned the fact that you're specifically working with a veterans charity, and so I guess that the cause of trying to help the people with the PTSD and the brain injury is kind of like a personal one to you, and that's why you're sort of agitating for change for that. And so that sort of joins the dots for me about where you're coming from. Am I summarizing correctly there?
Yeah, no, sure. I'm going to ask you about the trip itself, though. I kind of glossed over that. So like, was it kind of like, was it a really deep one? How many grams was it? Was it like, were you in the kind of multiverse? What was that about?
Well, which trip? The first time I ever did it, or the second?
Well, what's top one? What's your kind of top take?
I would say my favorite trip was probably with my friend from high school in Thailand. This was the second time I went to Pai, and the story was I was living in Thailand, and he decided to come and visit me, and then we went up from Bangkok to Chiang Mai, where I used to live, and then we went up to the town of Pai, and we both did mushrooms, and it was my third or fourth time doing mushrooms, and it was his first time, and we just had an amazing time together in the vast open Thai jungle. It was really fun.
I can imagine.
No, it was amazing.
And so that leads us on to another of our regular questions, which is about, spirituality, to which, these kind of psychedelics can be sometimes connected, although they don't have to be. Did you have a religious upbringing? Do you have, strong ideas about the great beyond? Yeah. Where are you on spirituality?
It's not something I spend a lot of time thinking about. Like, I'm just trying to become as good a comedian as I can be, and then also become as good a poker player as I can be. And if I can do those things, then I'm sure I'll have a pretty decent life, and I'll be in a spot where I can think about what's beyond this.
Right. And as part of those, the interesting thing actually, the both of you are mentioning is about this kind of like connection to nature. And I'm living one of these evil technology lives with like VR headsets, and Joe's like, oh no, Sam.
I've seen it. That's the thing. This guy's so evil that he brings the VR technology to the stand-up stage,
into the sacred comedy space.
Exactly.
Well, and this is the thing that we mentioned before, is like, you talk about being worried about the AI apocalypse, and I don't know, it's like I program like AI, and but I'm getting confused now here. But
I'd say like I'm probably more scared of the job apocalypse than I am the AI apocalypse, at least in my lifetime.
Right.
Like,
as in everything being automated, and they're just being they're being like AI poker players who could just like.
Oh, they're already are AI poker players. Like, they like AI is like for chess. AI is so good now that even the best chess players in the world cannot beat AI. So that, and the thing with poker is that, chess is a much more complex game than poker, but the thing with poker is that chess is played, it's just 2 players, whereas poker can be up to 9 players. So it's a little bit difficult for AI to really register all of those factors, but it's getting there.
Yeah. Well, then there's more. There's so many different lines there. But
does that just then? Sorry, just on the poker thing. Then does that just become then almost like kind of big syndicates playing against each other? Then is that what that becomes?
Like, the thing is that like there's already like poker solvers or calculators, and basically the way you win money in poker nowadays, online, like live poker is a little bit different, and I'm going to go play a live poker game in the Victoria after this podcast is done. But online poker, like the best online players are players who are basically mirroring the solutions that these solvers are outputting as best as they can. Like, the guys who are getting as close to that as possible are the guys who are winning all the money.
Right.
But they're so incredibly complex that you can never do it perfectly as a human.
Right. Incredible. So how long have you been in the poker game then?
About 9 years.
Right. And you're doing well enough at it to,
yeah,
keep the lights on.
I'm doing well enough at it that I can afford a bedroom in London in an apartment that doesn't even have a living room and is shared between me and 3 other people.
Yeah, it's difficult in London. But I'm just gonna jump us back. I think as you said, like, for your life, it's like to get as good as poker, get as good as comedy, have a nice life. But you also talk about some of the trips and like the
absolutely. I like that. That's my that's like, if I have a day off to relax, like a good trip would be like a really good way to fucking do it.
And I'm just wondering, is there a spiritual dimension to that? Is it just like you're having a break, or does it connect you to something bigger? Is this sort of connection with nature or anything at all, or that's
I'd say I don't, under normal circumstances, I'm someone who maybe doesn't have a very high feeling of self-worth or appreciation for myself. Whereas when I am on mushrooms, majority of the time, I get a nice high and I can start to appreciate and love myself in that mind-altered time frame. However, there has been a couple of instances when I have not felt good about myself on mushrooms, and that was, of course, not the funnest of times, but on reflection, quite a good experience to have.
No, for sure. Just we're both Scottish,
Yeah.
and we come. Scotland's got a tradition of being in my experience anyway, growing up, quite a harsh place.
It was.
Where kind of everything was fair game to be. The piss could get taken out of you for everything, and all the time. And it doesn't look like it, but actually my mother was mixed race. My granddad's Nigerian, so we were like, so we had that sort of 1980s Scotland sort of kind of overt and casual and everything else, kind of racism sort of percolating around as well. So what was your kind of is your comedy sort of formed from your from the school of the Scottish brutal hard knocks, or is it more of a
absolutely
sort of
absolutely I think so. Like there's a like, it's interesting when I think back and when I think of the comedy that I'm trying to create. I'm trying to, as ridiculous as this may sound, I'm doing my best to try and create a new sort of subgenre of comedy, like this it's hard to explain, like this melancholy constant feeling of the world is against you kind of thing. I think that gets captured very well in music, but nobody's really doing it in comedy, and I want to try my best to capture that in comedy. And I like when I sit down to write, I've always got like the kind of genre that I would love to create like in the back of my head, and I'm trying to write through that genre kind of thing.
So is that do you have a kind of lyrical flow to the words, or is there
sometimes
tone to it?
It's not got a musical tone to it, that's for sure. I'm not a musical comedian, but like it's hard to explain. But I mean, if you did watch my comedy, maybe you would get that feeling.
Right.
But yeah.
So do you feel like the Scottish comedy gods are with you in that sense?
A little bit. Like I'm certainly I'd say like heavily inspired by Frankie Boyle in a lot of ways. Like I think he was an exceptionally good comedy writer, and like I'm not sure I would have started doing stand-up if it wasn't reading his autobiography in particular, which was really, really hilarious, but also bleak. Well, if you don't know, the title of Frankie Boyle's autobiography is "My Shit Life So Far," and it's a very fitting title if you read the book. So
I mean, I read it. I mean, I guess that sort of we had our own sort of, not autobiography, but I mean, we had our own sort of chronicler of our lives in Irvine Welsh. I mean, Irvine Welsh wrote about our lives. I come from Leith, and that I was in it in that time and space. I know all those characters. I've been in many of those situations, and that is he wasn't making it up. That's like I was born not far away from that toilet in the the toilet in the
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah,
I was born not far from there, and in that where that's set in the actual book. That. Wow. So it's a big part of my life, but yeah, I sort of I think I mean I've lived in England for a long time now, hence the Jockney accent. But I do think without that, I think it's not possible. Like I know it's uncomfortable, and when I've been on stage and it's very uncomfortable to not get the response you want and all the rest of it, but I can't think of any better preparation for that than a life growing up in Scotland.
I completely agree. That should be a one of the jokes in your like sets that you do, because that's a great point. But the problem is that life is so cushy for these southern cunts that they just won't understand the reference that we're talking about. But yes,
Yeah, that's just all over my head, really.
yeah, but you're absolutely right. It was looking back on it, like growing up in Scotland, like going to high school and a Scottish, comprehensive high school. It's a fucking dog pound. Like it's horrible.
And I'm saying that with love. Like the Central Belt is a scary place. Man.
Yeah. No,
scary place, the Central Belt. I mean, we fostered a girl who was in a children's home in Broxburn, and so we used to go out there quite a lot. And I used to play cricket a little bit in a place like Fald House. You know where Fald House is? And like then you got like your Stenhouse Muirs, and Stenhouse Muirs is a bit more kind of countryside, a bit more sort of genteel like. But that bit basically on the motorway, what's it, the M8, isn't it? It's the
I don't drive, so yeah.
That road between Glasgow and Edinburgh, the bits off there.
Yeah.
Sam, to give you a bit of insight, the kids used to play chicken across the motorway, like children on their school breaks used to run across the motorway.
I've heard of that.
Just mad stuff,
Oh, Jesus.
But yeah,
crazy
so
times.
there you go.
Yeah, well, I think we're coming up on time. It's been a fascinating conversation. This is going to be
it has been
episode. But Craig, before we go, anything else you want to tell us? Anything you want to share about where people can follow you, where they can come and see you doing your comedy? What can you tell the listeners?
Well, I'm on Instagram, and I am debating or not whether I will start posting a lot more regularly there, and that is at Craig Crawmedy. And I also have a Twitter account at Notes of a Hack, and I really don't use it too much, but you can follow me on there.
Fantastic. Well, we'll put those links in the
and
and so if you want to see the dates of when you'll be performing, what's the best place to see that?
I'm a booker's worst nightmare because I don't fucking promote anything, but I will be doing Up the Creek Comedy Club, the Blackout, which is if you're a open micer or someone who wants to, even if you're not even wanting to perform comedy, if you just want to be an audience member and you want to watch some comedy, Up the Creek Comedy Club on a Thursday night is the best place in London, in my opinion. Especially if you are a comedian, you want to get in there as soon as possible, because the great thing about the Blackout is that if you survive the 5 minutes of the Gong show, you get the 5-minute clip of you performing at their club, and it's a really, really nice video. It's really well edited, sounds great, and then you can then use that clip to send to other promoters in the city and all over the country. It's a fantastic place to go. Yeah, couldn't speak highly enough of Up the Creek Comedy Club.
I'm sorry, I'm doing my course right now, so I was there.
Fantastic.
I was there yesterday, but no, I'm gonna make that point. So when you're gonna be down there quite soon?
April 7th. I'm all I'm doing so. Is there any point in me doing all the smaller gigs that I'm doing?
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, if you give them to me, we'll get them. We'll put a list of them in the show notes, and
sure. But I'm also doing the King Gong show on the last Monday of May, and that'll be good fun. I managed to beat the Gong and make it to the final when I did it in November, and it's been a 6-month waiting list to try it again, so I'm looking forward to trying it again.
Fantastic.
Balls of steel, man.
Yeah.
All right, nice one. It's great to chat. Hope to meet you on one of these gigs one of these days.
Yeah, so
absolutely. Big I'm sure we'll meet again on the circuit, Sam. And
we'll look forward to having you on the show again. After once you've cracked through the if you remember us once you've cracked the circuit and so on. Huge thanks to Craig Craw for being on the show with us today. It's Comedians on Technology, People and Drugs. Remember, you can go to patreon.com/comedians on to help support the show, help pay for the you know the Zoom recording. We've got professional Zoom, you know, it all costs money. So you know, and get access to our members only Slack, to special outtakes and other bits and pieces of the outro and so on. Thanks so much for joining us. See you again next time.